I'm Bill Gage, a former Secret Service agent, and for the first time, we'll be breaking down the entire timeline of the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. We'll be analyzing every critical detail from the moment Thomas Crooks began planning his attack to the decisive actions taken by the Secret Service to evacuate President Trump to safety. Let's get started. July 3rd, Trump plans to hold a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. These events, they're planned weeks in advance. Most likely the last week of June is when the Secret Service began preparations and sent someone from the Trump detail to conduct a protective advance for the protective detail. They began discussing probably inner and outer perimeters, the number of attendees. The Secret Service considered Trump a very high threat candidate. There would have been someone from the counter sniper team as part of that advance team, as well as someone from the counter assault team. And at some point, they also would have brought in a local police officer counterpart, whether that was from the Pennsylvania State Police or even the Butler police. Someone would have been brought in early on during the advanced stages of the protective advance. July 8th, personnel assigned to the agency's Pittsburgh field office conducted planning meetings and a site walkthrough with law enforcement partners and campaign staff. The Secret Service is heavily reliant on local partners, state police, local police, in order to effectively carry out their protective mission. The most important thing is to have traffic controlled so that the motorcade can run smoothly. And that is a crucial part of not only the advance team, but the protective model that the Secret Service uses. On July 10th, Secret Service counter sniper and technical security personnel arrived in Pittsburgh and began the protective advance. The counter snipers are some of the most experienced people in the entire agency. They get up on roofs, they use their rangefinders, they have very sophisticated optics that are used during the planning process. Everything from 1,000 yards in is what the counter snipers are looking for during the advance. And how they can mitigate those threats by either line of sight. And they're looking at things like, okay, where are we going to set the stage up? If we set the stage up here, how many steps will we need for the president to get up to the dais? Usually every day, the lead advance will sit down with different members of the advance team and go over ad nauseum what they've been working on during the advance. So there'll be meeting after meeting after meeting to make sure this all comes together. On July 12th, build out for the campaign rally site began and Crooks started to plan his attack. We know from some media reporting that Crooks went to a shooting range several times. So it shows that he was practicing and planning his attack well before July 13th. There's been a lot of reporting and the FBI has released snippets of their investigation so far, which shows that Crooks visited a Home Depot to purchase a 5-foot ladder. And he also stopped at a local ammo shop to buy 50 rounds of ammunition. And he had to know that he was going to use a sniper attack as his method. So it's clear to me that he probably visited that site several days before and even walked around because he knew he was going to need a ladder to access the buildings and he knew he was going to need a sniper rifle. There's no way he would have known that without visiting the site. So the Butler Farm Show in Butler, Pennsylvania was a standard setup for the Secret Service. You can see tents behind the stage, having a covered arrival so President Trump could pull into the limo. This is a standard setup, again, for the Secret Service because you have the stage center, you have a contained crowd, the bleachers, and you have the counter snipers positioned directly behind the stage to provide overwatch for former President Trump during his speech. At some point early that morning, the Secret Service advance team would have met with their local field office counterparts. There would have been a meeting and they would have gone over everyone's exact responsibilities, which officer was going to be where, and what their requirements were. 12:30 p.m., the Secret Service opened the protective site to event staff and workers. The Secret Service would have already secured this venue. They have to sort of remove everybody from the site, set up their perimeters, do what they call a sweep, a protective sweep, and then they allow everyone back in. But everyone that's allowed back into the venue once the Secret Service has secured it has to go through the magnetometers. These are highly tuned machinery that are specifically designed for the Secret Service, and they're the best in the world with screening large crowds, but also doing it very, very effectively. They don't miss anything. These magnetometers can pick up small pieces of metal in your pocket, almost like pocket lint. 3 p.m. Crooks enters the rally. He's immediately flagged by a uniformed division officer at the magnetometer because he has a rangefinder in his pocket. Many people have rangefinders. Pennsylvania is a big hunting state, so it might not have drawn a lot of alarm to that Secret Service uniformed division officer at the magnetometer. And maybe Crooks played it off to say, oh, hey, sorry, my fault. I'll go put it back in my car. Most recreational golfers have rangefinders, and they mimic almost exactly kind of some of the off-the-shelf ones that people use for shooting sports. So these are very, very commercially readily available devices that wouldn't have drawn alarm at all, taken out of context. Now, if he had a firearm, if he was a wanted felon, if he was acting suspicious and he had the rangefinder, probably would have drawn more suspicion. But just within the context of what was happening at the time, it probably didn't draw much suspicion to the magnetometer officer. At approximately 5:06 p.m., Crooks is seen walking near the AGR building. You can see the AGR building to what the Secret Service would call to stage right. It's approximately 130 yards away, which is an easy shot for anyone with even a minimal amount of training with a scoped rifle. Crooks walking near the AGR building in and of itself probably didn't draw much suspicion. He didn't have a visible weapon. He wasn't carrying a rifle. So sometimes people walk around these events. They weren't able to get a ticket, so they just loiter on the outside hoping to catch a little bit of the event. So Crooks walking around probably didn't raise any suspicion by the police officers there. Approximately 5:30 p.m., a picture of Crooks was taken by a local police sniper who reported a suspicious person on the ground. Also, many reports followed that there was poor cell service, which hindered communications between law enforcement. When you have so many people using just a limited number of cell towers, it jams the towers. The signals aren't able to get through. So with these large events, the Secret Service will set up repeaters, which takes some of the burden off of the cell phone towers that are there. This type of event did not rate having a cell phone repeater by the Secret Service, prohibited law enforcement from being able to communicate and send a picture of the suspect. This was an outdoor rally from a former president who just so happens to be running for president again. And so that type of asset isn't provided for this type of event. So when someone's reported as suspicious, they will dispatch a Secret Service agent from the Protective Intelligence Division who's paired up with a local police counterpart. What is it about this person? Why are they being reported as suspicious? Are they lost? Have they tried to get into the event several times after being turned away? 5:45 p.m. Crooks is spotted scoping out a roof. So this is where the protective plan of the Secret Service, this is where it started to break down. So you have someone seen scoping out a roof. Again, is this suspicious? Is it not? Is it someone that just wants to see the event? Or is this somebody with ill intent? So when this person is reported scoping out the roof, this is when Crooks should have received very intense scrutiny, and they should have dispatched multiple officers to go look for him to find out what in the world he was doing trying to access this rooftop. In my time in the Secret Service, I never once stood on a rooftop. You just control roof access. So you would post somebody in the building near sort of the stairs going up to the roof, or you would just set up a perimeter around the building, either a Secret Service agent or a local police counterpart. 5:55 p.m., the Secret Service begins receiving more warnings of a suspicious person just 10 minutes before Trump takes the stage. This is very, very common. If there's no known threat, the detail leader in consultation with the staff has to make a judgment call on we're going to go forward as planned and allow Trump to take the stage. One of the issues that I have with some of the communications here was that officers and possibly agents, we don't know that yet, but the officers were texting each other rather than notify the command post via radio. Some of that should have been going over local police channels and not via text message. Why was this not put out over the radio? The post standers are on one radio channel and Trump's detail is on another channel. And the Secret Service doesn't have a unified radio system that it can communicate with the local police departments that are there. In extreme cases, sometimes agents will have to get a radio from the local law enforcement and carry that with them. The Secret Service has never been able to solve this communications piece because it's a very complex piece of technology with encrypted radio channels. This is something the Secret Service has struggled with for decades. 6:02 p.m., local police officers lose sight of the suspect. So once they lost sight of him, this is where the protective plan really starts to unravel, because we have this person who, again, these dots probably weren't connected yet, that this was the same person found with the rangefinder. This is the same person that was acting suspicious around the AGR building. They had this person under some surveillance. At this point, he wasn't suspected of a crime, but for some reason he drew police attention, and they had more than enough legal authority to detain him to find out exactly what he was doing at the event. The typical game plan is the protectee arrives to the event, in this case, former President Trump, and for a lot of these outdoor events, the staff wants them to walk down a gangway or a walkway, wave to the crowd as they're getting up to the stage. So at this point, the detail leader is slowly following him along the gangway, And the shift agents, those assigned to immediately to Trump's protective detail, are shadowing the president. The agents holding the stage will then be pushed off by the detail to go take additional posts somewhere nearby the stage. In this case, you also had two counter sniper teams. There's always going to be a sniper and an observer, and they're interchangeable. A sniper and a spotter, they're interchangeable. So there would have been Hercules 1 and Hercules 2, and they were directly above the stage. And then they sort of divide, if you think of a clock. So one of the Hercules teams would have been covering the 3 o'clock to the 12 o'clock, and one of the Hercules teams would have been covered from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So you have all of the angles sort of covered from the stage out. 6:05 p.m., Trump takes the stage. At this point, nothing about Crooks had been reported where he was armed or trying to harm anyone in any way. At this point, he was just a suspicious person. In every single event I worked in the Secret Service, there were always suspicious people being reported. So at this point, nothing had been reported that Crooks had ill intent. 6:09 p.m., Crooks scales the roof of the AGR building. No, he shouldn't have been able to gain access to the roof, but sometimes the counter snipers will have blind spots. The blind spots were supposed to be covered by either an agent or a local police officer prohibiting roof access. You see an air conditioning unit with some ductwork or some piping, and you say to yourself, wow, somebody could easily climb up that. It sounds like from some of the preliminary reporting that the local officers were inside the building and not outside. So clearly there was a miscommunication on who was responsible for what. 6:10 p.m., cops try to intercept Crooks on the roof. So now we have a serious breakdown in the Secret Service protective model. Now he's gained access to the roof. Police are notified, and 2 officers respond to interact with this person and find out exactly what he's doing on the roof. The CS teams have limited views of this roof just due to the tree branches, and the major component of the protective model here, which is not allowing roof access from that building, has broken down. 6:11 p.m., police encounter Crooks on the roof, and Crooks fires his first shots at Trump. The bullet whizzed by. Someone with a rifle in an elevated position has now taken shots at a Secret Service protectee. Several things are happening simultaneously here. So you have 2 police officers that are aware of Crooks' position on this roof. They try to hoist each other up, and one officer confronts Crooks. Crooks turns around with his rifle. The officer, sensing the danger and is about to be shot, immediately falls back off the roof, likely saving his life and possibly buying the Secret Service counter snipers some time. The shots were fired. Trump turned his head at the last second. That would have been catastrophic and most likely fatal. They rushed the stage, they covered Trump with their bodies, and they begin the evacuation. They performed that maneuver flawlessly. The Secret Service operates on what's called a cover and evacuate principle. You want to cover and evacuate the protectee with your body and begin to evacuate them. But that scrum of agents kind of grabbing him and kind of hustling him off the stage, again, it wasn't pretty, but they made it work. You also have to notify medical staff because now Trump's bleeding. You're taught this in Secret Service training. You have to check the protectee from head to toe. So the shift and the detail leader are making the call. We're going to evacuate the president and we're going to get out of here. So after Trump is shoved into the limo and the decision's made, they're going to evacuate, that detail leader is giving Trump a head to toe medical check. Hey, Mr. Trump, I need to check you. Where else are you shot? Is it just your ear? How severe is that? Are you shot anywhere else? Common people can be shot and not even know that they've been shot. So the detail leader was giving Trump a head-to-toe check for additional gunshot wounds. This is all happening simultaneously and very, very rapidly. So the detail leader's got to make a judgment call. Hey, yes, we're going to the hospital. 6:12 p.m., the Secret Service confirms the shooter is down. The Secret Service counter snipers had successfully taken out the suspected shooter, who we later learned was Thomas Crooks. We now know that Crooks was actually able to break down his AR-15 rifle into 2 pieces, and Crooks was able to do that and put it in his Swiss skier backpack. And that's how he was able to get it into the event. Despite being confronted by police, Crooks was able to get off 8 shots. Unfortunately, there were some casualties and 1 man was killed who was sitting just to Trump's right. And there were other victims that were seriously injured by the gunfire. 1:20 a.m., the FBI identifies Crooks as the gunman. Crooks most likely had no identification on him. And if he did, the FBI and the local agencies would have had to run his personally identifiable information, such as his social security number and his birthday, and that takes some time to run that information and verify it. And one of the things nobody's talking about is the CS officers that fired, they took a life, all right? And that's a criminal investigation. I think we can all agree that it'll be found a justified or reasonable use of force given the circumstances, but there still is that impact on those officers being investigated criminally. My initial reactions were, how could this have happened? When I first saw the footage, I didn't catch it live, but I turned on the TV very, very quickly afterward. I turned and asked my wife, like, how could someone have got a firearm into an event? After the assassination attempt on Reagan, the Secret Service made a lot of changes. There's always changes made after a security lapse, and the Secret Service will take a hard look at this and determine, hey, what went wrong? And what can we do to prevent it in the future, to prevent this from happening again?
So what now are we hearing from whistleblowers, Senator?
Well, what I've heard tonight, Jesse, is that most of the agents who were there at that rally in Butler were not Secret Service agents. They were, in fact, Homeland Security agents. And get this, most of those Homeland Security agents, the only training that they received was an online webinar, a 2-hour online webinar. And I'm told that about half the time, the sound to the webinar didn't even work.
The service has done this for decades because during a campaign season, the resources that the Secret Service has are stretched so razor thin because you have multiple candidates, multiple cities, multiple events that require scores of agents to help secure. In addition, you're going to have both major political party conventions that draw agents and resources for the Secret Service. The Secret Service gets stretched razor thin. There were times when I was an agent, we would use other federal agents from HSI and other DHS components, and these agents would typically receive a few days training, anywhere from a 3 to 5 day protection class. And I would like to think that's still going on. And if it's not, if they only did, as the whistleblower is saying, this 2-hour sort of Zoom training, and that's just completely unacceptable. This is totally a demand exceeding supply issue. The service just does not have enough agents to go around, and they have to pull those resources from somewhere else. And so that's why they're reliant on these other federal agents. You listen, perfect world, the Secret Service would have sent 500 agents to that site and had 20 counter snipers positioned all throughout the event. But the reality is the Secret Service just doesn't have that level of resources. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. I think as this investigation unfolds, some of the emails, text messages that are going to come out are going to explain exactly what the local law enforcement officers were told. This investigation is going to reveal what their specific instructions were and exactly where the miscommunication happened on who was responsible for what.